The morning Cole Holloway turned 18, the rain over Portland was not the heavy kind. It was the slow, gray kind. The kind that settles into the bones of a building and stays there. The kind that washes nothing clean. He sat on the edge of his bunk in a room he had slept in for the last 6 years and counted the cracks in the ceiling one final time. 11 cracks. He had counted them so many nights that they had become a constellation he could draw with his eyes closed. A map of every hour he had spent waiting to be old enough to leave. Down the hall, the other boys were eating breakfast. He could hear the clatter of plastic trays and the low rumble of the breakfast attendant's voice, telling someone to sit down and eat. Nobody had wished him a happy birthday. Nobody knew. The state did not celebrate the days a boy aged out. The state only celebrated when the paperwork was done and the bunk was free for the next one. His belongings sat in a cardboard box at his feet. 2 pairs of jeans, both worn at the knees. 4 t-shirts. A heavy gray hooded sweatshirt that was a size too big and had been left behind by a kid named Bryce, who had aged out 2 years ago. A toothbrush. A comb. A folded photograph of a man and a woman he could barely remember calling Mom and Dad. And underneath all of it, wedged against the cardboard like a relic, his birth certificate and a social security card so stiff and unused, it could have been a forgery. That was 18 years of life on this earth. That was everything he owned. A woman knocked once on the doorframe and stepped in without waiting for an answer. Marlene Hayes. His caseworker for the last 2 years. Marlene wore the same look every caseworker wore. Tired sympathy stretched thin over a long career of files and faces. Her shoes were sensible. Her hair was pulled back. Her smile was a small professional thing designed to last only as long as a goodbye. "Big day, Cole," she said. He nodded. He did not trust his voice yet. "Bring your box. We'll do the paperwork in my office and then you can be on your way." He stood up. The bunk creaked. The room was suddenly very small and very still. And he understood the way a man understands a thing without anyone telling him that he was leaving and he was not coming back. The cracked ceiling. The square of light from the window. The metal locker. The mattress that smelled like every boy who had ever slept on it. He looked at all of it for one long second and then he picked up his box and walked out. Marlene's office smelled like burned coffee and the cheap lemon disinfectant they used to wipe down the linoleum. There was a desk. There was a beige folder. There was a ballpoint pen on top of the folder, capped and waiting. She gestured to the chair. He sat. The cardboard box sat on his lap because he did not want to put it on the floor. "Congratulations, Cole. As of today, you are legally an adult. You are no longer a ward of the state of Oregon." She said it the way you might say the weather forecast. Flat, routine. A line she had spoken so many times it had worn a groove in her tongue. He nodded again. "You'll be receiving a discharge stipend of $200. That money is meant to last you until you secure employment. There is also a one-time bus voucher good for travel within the state. Use it wisely." She slid the bills across the desk. Crisp 10s and 20s paper clipped together. He stared at them for a long moment and then he put them in his pocket. "Now," she said, and her tone changed. Just slightly. She pulled a manila envelope out of a drawer and laid it on the desk between them. The envelope was thick. The envelope had his name typed on the front in clean black letters. Cole Holloway. There is one more matter to discuss. Your inheritance. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. My what? Your inheritance. From your paternal grandfather, Wade Holloway. Wade. The name hit him in a place he had not let anything reach in a very long time. He had buried that name. He had buried it because it was easier to bury it than to keep digging it up and finding nothing. Wade Holloway. The old man with the calloused hands. The smell of pipe tobacco and motor oil. The voice low and steady like a creek running over flat rocks. The man who had held him after his parents died and had then, without a word, without a goodbye, without a single visit in 12 years, simply vanished from his life. He died, Cole, 11 years ago. Cole said nothing. He had already known somewhere deep that the old man was gone. You feel it when a tether snaps, even if you cannot say when it happened. His estate has been held in trust by the state because you were a minor with no legal guardian at the time of his passing. Today, that trust transfers to you. She opened the envelope. She slid a deed across the desk. She slid a key across the desk. The key was old and dark and ornate, the kind of key that did not belong in this century. He picked up the deed. The paper was yellow. The corners were soft from age. He read the words. 5 acres of land. A property in eastern Oregon in a place called Juniper Creek, 300 miles east. Includes a residential structure. Includes a natural cavern formation. A cave. His grandfather had left him a cave. I have to be straight with you, Cole. The land has been appraised. It is by every metric the county uses worthless. It is mostly rock. The cabin on the property has been condemned for years. There is no electricity. There is no running water. The cave itself is a hole in the ground. He looked at the key in his palm. It was heavier than it had any right to be. Worthless, he said. Yes. He turned the key over. It caught the fluorescent light from the ceiling and dulled it the way old brass does. The way a thing that has been held by many hands does. He thought of the man with the calloused hands. He thought of the smell of pipe tobacco. He thought of a story that man used to tell him late at night about a boy and a river, and a question the boy asked the river and the answer the river gave. He could not remember the answer. There is one more thing. Marlene's voice was different now. Careful. The way a voice gets careful when it is approaching the part of the conversation it has rehearsed in the mirror. She slid a second envelope across the desk. This one was thinner. This one was heavier somehow in the way it sat between them. There is a standing offer to purchase the property. He looked up. From a development company called Titan Industries. They have been buying up land in that part of the state for several years. They have authorized me to present their offer to you on the day of your discharge. On the day of his discharge. That phrase sat in his chest like a splinter. They are offering $5,000. Cash. Today. You sign the deed over. You walk out of here with $5,000 in your pocket, and you start your life. That is more money than most kids in your situation see in the first year of their adulthood, Cole. My advice, both as your former caseworker and as a person who has watched a lot of kids walk out that door with nothing, is to take it. She smiled the professional smile. He did not smile back. He was looking at the envelope. He was looking at the way it had been placed there, with such practiced ease. He was looking at the way she had not been surprised. He was looking at the way her voice had rehearsed itself, the way the offer had been waiting in the drawer like a cocked hammer, the way the bus voucher and the cardboard box and the pen on top of the folder had all been part of a sequence. The deed in his hand was 11 years old. The offer on the desk was timed to the minute. Somebody had been waiting for him to turn 18. Somebody had circled this day on a calendar and waited. He folded the deed. He folded it slowly the way his grandfather had once folded a road map on the hood of a pickup truck. He put the deed in his shirt pocket. He put the key in his jeans pocket. He left the offer on the desk. "I want to see it first." Marlene's smile faltered. Not all at once, just at the corners the way drywall sags before it cracks. "Cole, I want to see the land. It is 300 miles from here. It is in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing there to see." "Then it won't take long." She set down her pen. She looked at him for a long moment. The professional sympathy slipped from her face, and what was underneath was something more complicated. Frustration. A flicker of something that might have been respect if it had been allowed to grow. And under that something he did not have a name for yet, but would later understand was the look of a person who has been compromised and is looking at the one person who might find that out. "Suit yourself," she said. He stood up. He picked up his cardboard box. He walked out of her office and down the long fluorescent hallway of the Department of Family Services for the last time. The linoleum squeaked under his sneakers. A clock on the wall ticked. A door somewhere closed. He did not look back. When he stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was the color of an old nickel. The buses came down the wet street in slow, hissing convoys. He stood on the sidewalk with his box at his feet, and the deed in his pocket, and the key like a heartbeat against his thigh. And for the first time in his life, no one was telling him where to go. He walked to the bus station. The voucher took him east. The Greyhound pulled out of Portland at noon. Cole sat by the window with his box wedged between his feet and his forehead pressed against the cold glass. And he watched the city peel away behind him, layer by layer. The high-rises first, then the office parks, then the strip malls and the gas stations, then the long, low warehouses with their loading docks and their chain-link fences, then the suburbs with their cul-de-sacs and their identical roofs, then the trees, then the world opened up. He had not seen sky like this in 12 years. It went on, blue at the top and bone white at the horizon, and the road cut through it like a black scar. The mountains in the distance were the color of old denim. The fields were the color of straw. There were no buildings for long stretches, just fence posts, and the occasional hawk balanced on a wire. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about the calloused hands. He thought about the workshop behind the old house, the one with the sawdust on the floor, and the vise on the bench, and the radio that only got AM stations. He thought about the way Wade had taught him to hold a hammer, not by the neck, by the end. Let the weight do the work, boy. You don't need to fight it. You just need to guide it. He thought about the smell of fresh-cut pine and gun oil. He thought about the way his grandfather had cleaned that old shotgun every Sunday after church sitting at the kitchen table with the pieces laid out on a folded bath towel, working in silence the way a man works when he is praying. He thought about Korea. Wade had served in Korea. He had been a young man then, no older than Cole was now. He had come back with a limp that got worse in the cold and a flat metal lighter that he carried in his pocket every day of his life. He had not talked about the war. Not once. But sometimes late at night, Cole would hear him on the back porch, and he would know without looking that the old man was sitting out there in the dark, smoking his pipe, listening to a war that had ended 60 years before and never quite stopped. Wade had told him once, "A good man keeps his word, boy, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching." Cole had been 6 years old. He had not understood it then. He was beginning to understand it now. The bus stopped in a town that was barely a town. It stopped again in a town that was even smaller. The other passengers thinned out. By the time the sun was getting low, Cole was almost the only one left. The driver glanced back at him in the long mirror and said nothing. The road narrowed. The trees disappeared. The land flattened into something old and patient and indifferent. Junipers, sage, red dirt. Fences that went on forever and held nothing in. The bus pulled into Juniper Creek a little after 6. It was not a town the way a town has a main street and a stoplight and a sign that tells you the population. It was 4 buildings and a gas pump and a pair of telephone poles holding up a single sagging wire. A diner with a hand-painted sign. A general store with a screen door. A post office with the flag taken down for the night. A boarded-up building that might once have been a feed store. That was Juniper Creek. The bus hissed to a stop. The driver opened the door. "Last call," he said without turning around. "End of the line." Cole stood up. His knees ached. He picked up his box. He stepped down onto the cracked concrete of a sidewalk that had not seen new concrete since before he was born. And the bus closed its door behind him and pulled away. And the diesel cloud thinned. And then there was nothing. Just silence. Real silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind of silence you can feel in your teeth. After 18 years of the city of fluorescent hum and bus brakes, and shouting in the next room, this silence was the loudest thing he had ever heard. He stood in it for a long time. Then he walked to the diner. The diner was called Earl's. There was no apostrophe on the sign because the sign was old and somebody had painted over the apostrophe with a smear of cream that had since faded. The screen door slapped shut behind him. The smell of bacon grease and coffee and old cigarette smoke rolled over him. And somewhere a radio was playing a country song so quietly, it was more rumor than music. A man stood behind the counter. He was old. He was thin. He had hands the size and color of catcher's mitts, and his face was a topographical map of long winters and longer summers. He was wiping down a coffee cup with a white rag, and when Cole walked in, he stopped wiping and just looked. "You lost, son." "I'm looking for a piece of property," Cole said. "Holloway property." The white rag stopped moving entirely. The old man set down the cup. He came around the counter slowly, the way a man comes around a counter when he wants a closer look at a thing he is not sure he is seeing. He stopped 2 steps away from Cole. He looked at his face. He looked at his cardboard box. He looked at his face again longer this time, and his eyes did something that Cole did not understand at first. They filled. "You're Wade's boy," the old man said. His voice was not a question. "I'm his grandson. I know who you are." The old man stepped forward. He put one of those big leather hands on Cole's shoulder. The grip was firm. The grip was not friendly the way strangers are friendly. The grip was the way a man grips another man when something is being said that does not need words. "My name is Earl Mathers. Your grandfather and I shared a lot of coffee at this counter." "A lot of coffee?" "Yes, sir." "They told you he gave you up, didn't they?" Cole did not answer. He did not have to. Earl let go of his shoulder. He turned away. He went back behind the counter and he picked up the cup and he started wiping it again, and Cole could see that his hand was not as steady as it had been a minute before. "That's not what happened, son. That ain't what happened at all." Cole's throat closed. "What did happen?" Earl shook his head slowly. He set the cup down. He was looking at the wall now at a yellowed fishing photograph thumbtacked beside the menu, and he was a long way away. "That ain't my story to tell. That's his. He's gone. That don't mean he ain't telling it." Earl reached under the counter. He pulled out a coffee mug. He filled it without asking. He pushed it across the counter to Cole and pointed to a stool. "Sit. Eat. On the house. You got a long road ahead of you and you ain't gonna walk it on an empty stomach." Cole sat. He drank the coffee. It was bitter and hot and very, very good. Earl made him a plate of eggs and a piece of ham and 2 slices of toast that had been buttered with a generous and unembarrassed hand. Cole ate. Earl did not talk. Earl let the silence do the work the way men of a certain age know how to do. And when Cole was finished, Earl took the plate away and refilled the coffee and finally said, "You'll be wanting a ride out to the place." "Yes, sir." "Hollis Bishop runs the store across the street. He does deliveries out that way sometimes. Tell him I sent you. He'll take you for fair money." "Thank you." Earl looked at him for a long moment. "Boy," he said, and his voice was very low, "I want you to listen to me. Your grandfather was the finest man I ever knew. The finest. And what was done to him by people in suits with badges and titles? What was done to him in offices in Salem and Portland? By men who never set foot in a place like this that was a crime. It was a crime and it was buried. And a lot of folks around here have been waiting a long time to see if the truth would ever come up out of the ground." He leaned forward on the counter. His eyes were wet. "You came back, son. That's a start." Cole could not speak. He nodded. He left a $5 bill under his plate, even though Earl had said it was on the house, because Wade Holloway had taught him that you do not let a man pay for your supper without leaving something behind. And he walked across the street to the general store with his cardboard box in one arm, and the deed in his shirt pocket, and the key in his jeans, and the silence of Juniper Creek pressed in on him from every side like a held breath. Hollis Bishop was younger than Earl, 45 maybe, heavy through the shoulders. He had a quiet way of moving and a quieter way of speaking, and when Cole told him what he needed, Hollis just nodded. "I'll take you out. $20. Figure that's fair." Cole gave him $20. They climbed into a Ford pickup that had been blue once a long time ago and was now mostly the color of dust. The engine started on the third try. Hollis backed out of the lot. He turned onto the dirt road that ran east out of Juniper Creek, and the truck began to climb gently into the sage country, and the sun was getting low behind them. "How far?" Cole asked. 5 miles. "Did you know him?" Hollis was quiet for a long moment. The road was washboarded in places and the truck rattled, and his eyes stayed on the road. "Everybody around here knew Wade Holloway." "What do you mean?" "I mean he was the kind of man who fixed your fence when you were sick and would not take $1 for it. The kind of man who showed up at funerals. The kind of man who kept his word." "Was he crazy?" Hollis glanced at him. "Who told you that?" "My caseworker. She said he spent his last years digging holes." Hollis went quiet again. "He was digging," Hollis said finally. "But he wasn't crazy. There's a difference, son, between a man who's lost his mind and a man who's looking for something he can't tell you about. Your grandfather was the second kind." The truck climbed a low rise. The sage thinned. The land opened. "There she is." Hollis pointed. Cole looked. His heart, which had been carrying him for 300 miles, sank like a stone. The property sat at the end of the dirt road in a shallow bowl of land between two ridges. A barn. Or what had once been a barn. The roof had collapsed inward like the cracked shell of a beetle, and the walls leaned at angles that had given up arguing with gravity. A cabin. Small. Wooden. The porch sagged. The windows were boarded. The chimney leaned. Around it, weeds had come up through the gravel and through the cracks in the stone path, and through the rusted fender of an old truck that had been sitting in the yard since before the Berlin Wall came down. Behind it all, a wall of red rock rose up against the dimming sky, and somewhere in that wall, a darker shadow marked the entrance to the cave. "That's it," Hollis said. "That's it," Cole repeated. The truck rolled to a stop in the gravel. "You sure about this, son?" Cole did not answer right away. He was looking at the cabin. He was looking at the porch. He was looking at the way the last light of the sun caught the old wood and turned it the color of iron. "I have to be." Hollis nodded slowly. He reached across and shook Cole's hand. The grip was solid. The grip was not pity. "You holler if you need anything, anything at all. We got phones in town. We got people who'll come. Thank you. And son." "Yes, sir." "Welcome home." Cole climbed down out of the pickup with his cardboard box. The door slammed shut behind him. Hollis backed the truck around in a wide arc, the headlights swinging across the broken barn and the dead truck and the boarded-up cabin. And then the pickup was gone, rattling back down the dirt road in a long plume of red dust. And Cole Holloway was alone on the property his grandfather had left him. The silence came back. He stood in it. He stood in it for a long time. He set the cardboard box down in the gravel. He walked toward the cabin. The porch creaked under his weight. The boards groaned the way old men groan when they sit down. He reached for the door. Something moved. Under the porch. Slow. Heavy. The dragging sound of an animal that has been lying in one place for a long time. Cole froze. His hand went to his belt. There was nothing on his belt. He had nothing. He took a slow step backward, his eyes on the dark space under the porch. And from that dark space, very slowly, a head emerged. A dog. An old dog. A big one. A shepherd mix, by the look of him. Gray around the muzzle and gray around the eyes, with one ear that stood up and one that hung down, and a body that had once been muscular and was now mostly bone covered with gray fur. The dog crawled out from under the porch, one slow inch at a time. The dog's eyes did not leave Cole's face. The dog stopped. The dog stared, and then the dog made a sound that Cole would remember for the rest of his life. It was not a bark. It was not a growl. It was a low, broken whine, the sound a dog makes when it has been waiting for something for so long that it had stopped believing the thing was coming, and now the thing has come, and the dog does not know what to do with the fact of it. Cole's knees went out from under him. He sat down on the dust of the porch. The dog took one step, then another, then another. The dog crossed the gravel one slow, painful step at a time, his hips swaying with the kind of arthritis that a young dog never imagines. And he came to where Cole was sitting, and he put his gray muzzle against Cole's hand. Cole touched him. The fur was rough. The dog smelled like dust and creosote, and the long, long memory of a man who had not been there for a very long time. "Scout," Cole whispered. He did not know how he knew the name. He just knew it. The dog's tail moved. Once. Twice. A slow, tired wag, the way a tail moves when it has not been used in years, and is remembering how. From the road behind him, a voice called out, "That's Scout." Cole turned. Hollis Bishop had stopped his pickup at the bend in the road. He was leaning out the driver's window. The truck idled in the dust. He's been waiting. We've all been feeding him, Earl mostly. Drives out twice a week with table scraps. Wade told us before he passed the boy will come back. Tell the dog to wait. So we told him. Cole could not speak. 11 years, son. That dog has been waiting 11 years. The pickup pulled away. The dust settled. Cole sat on the porch with his hand on the dog's gray head, and the sun went down behind the ridge, and the sky turned the color of old steel, and a slow wind came up out of the sage and smelled like wood smoke from a fire. Nobody was burning. He sat there for a long time. Eventually he stood. The dog stood with him slowly, joint by joint. Cole walked to the cabin door. He pushed. The door was locked. He looked down at the lock. It was new. The body of the lock was old brass, tarnished green by years of weather. But the cylinder was new, bright, recent. The metal had not yet had time to dull. And around the doorframe, in the dust on the threshold, were boot prints that did not belong to him, and did not belong to Wade, and did not belong to the dog. Boot prints with a smooth tread. City boots. Somebody had been here. Recently. Cole stood very still on the porch with the dog's nose at his knee, and a coldness crawled up his back that had nothing to do with the wind. He took the old key out of his pocket. He tried it. It did not fit. Of course it did not fit. The key was for the original lock. Whoever had put the new lock on had done so without permission, without a court order, without the deed. and they had not bothered to leave a key for the rightful owner because they had not expected the rightful owner to come. Cole walked around the side of the cabin. The boards of the porch creaked behind him. The dog followed. There was a window on the side of the cabin that had been boarded up, but not well. The plywood had warped. The nails had backed out. He worked his fingers into the gap and pulled, and the plywood came loose with a long, dry groan, and he was looking through the window into the dim interior of the cabin where his grandfather had spent the last lonely years of his life. Cole pulled himself through. His feet hit the floor. The boards did not give. They had been replaced. Someone had stood on this floor recently, and someone had not wanted to fall through. He stood in the cabin in the last gray light of the day, and he looked around. A single room, a cot in one corner with a bare mattress and a folded wool blanket. A pot-bellied stove against the far wall. A small wooden table. A chair. A set of shelves. A wash basin. A hand pump fixed to a cast iron pipe that came up through the floor. And on the wall above the cot, mounted on two simple wooden pegs, an old shotgun. Cole walked to it. He took it down. The wood was warm. The wood was smooth. Wade had refinished this stock himself. Cole could feel the grain where the old man's hands had worked it. He broke the action open and looked at the bores. Clean. Recently oiled. The metal smelled the way Sundays had smelled in his grandfather's kitchen 12 years ago, when he had been 6 years old, and a man with calloused hands had been teaching him how a barrel was supposed to be cared for. He closed the action. He set the shotgun back on the pegs. He turned slowly. There was a shelf above the table. On the shelf, in a simple wooden frame, a photograph. Cole lifted it down. A young man in olive drab. A jacket. A field cap pushed back on his forehead. A grin you would not have expected from an old man who did not smile much. Behind him, a low cinder-block building and a flag with a coat of arms Cole did not recognize. The bottom of the photograph had been written on in ballpoint pen in a hand he knew. Poussin March, 1952. Holloway, age 19. 19. A year older than Cole was right now. He held the picture for a long time. The dog had come into the cabin behind him through the open window and was now lying on the floor at his feet, head on his paws, watching. Cole set the photograph back on the shelf. He stood. He looked around the room one more time, and he understood slowly with a coldness that grew in him as the light drained out of the windows that whoever had been in this cabin recently had not come for the cabin. The cabin had not been disturbed. The shotgun had not been taken. The blanket had not been moved. They had come for what was past it. They had come for the cave. He walked to the back wall of the cabin. There was a door. The door had been replaced too. New hinges. A new latch. He opened it. He stepped out into the backyard. The cliff face rose up before him, dark in the gathering dusk. The cave entrance was a narrow black slash in the red rock, half hidden behind an overgrown juniper bush. Cole walked to it. The dog walked with him. He took out the small flashlight he had bought at a gas station in Pendleton. He clicked it on. The beam was thin. He pushed aside the juniper branches. He stepped into the cave. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The air was clean and old and smelled of stone. The walls were close, and then they widened. The flashlight played across rock that had been polished by water that no longer flowed. He took 10 paces in. He took 10 more. Then he stopped. His flashlight had caught something in a small cleft of rock just above eye level, half hidden by a lip of stone. Something glinted. Cole leaned closer. It was a lens. A small black glass lens. A camera. A small modern surveillance camera no bigger than a matchbook, mounted with industrial adhesive against the rock. Its red light was off, but the lens was clean. The lens had been wiped recently. The lens was pointed toward the entrance of the cave. Cole stared at it. The dog growled softly behind him, low in his throat, the way a dog growls at a thing it has smelled before. Somebody had put a camera in his grandfather's cave. Somebody had been watching this place. Somebody had been watching the entrance, watching the trail, waiting for a boy to come up from Portland on a bus and walk through that opening and into a story he did not yet understand. $5,000, Marlene had said. $5,000 and a bus voucher and a smile. Cole reached up. He took the camera in his hand. The adhesive resisted. He pulled harder. It came loose with a sound like a small bone breaking. He held it in his palm. He looked at it. He set it on the rock. He picked up a stone. He brought the stone down on the camera once, twice, 3 times. The plastic shattered. The lens cracked. The little circuit board inside split into pieces no bigger than a fingernail. He stood over the wreckage, breathing hard, his hand trembling, the flashlight beam shaking on the wall. Then he turned and walked out of the cave. The dog walked with him. Cole came out into the dusk. The sky above the ridges was the color of a bruised deep purple at the top and rust at the edges, and the first star had come out over the eastern horizon. The night air smelled of cold sage and something colder underneath it. He walked to the porch. He sat down on the top step. The dog sat beside him. Cole put his hand on the dog's head. The fur was warm now from the cabin floor. The dog's breathing was slow and steady. 11 years of waiting. The old dog had outlasted a man's life and a boy's childhood and a state's paperwork, and he had not given up. Cole looked out over the property, the broken barn, the dead truck, the cabin behind him, the black mouth of the cave behind the cabin, the ridges, the sage, the first stars coming out. He had come here believing his grandfather had abandoned him. He had come here believing the land was worthless. He had come here believing he was alone. He had been wrong about all 3. Somewhere out there in an office in a city he had left behind, a man named Royce Calloway was waiting for a phone call. Somewhere out there, a contract was sitting in a folder, the ink already dry, waiting for an 18-year-old kid to come crawling back with a signature and a thank you. Somewhere out there, a plan that had been put in motion 11 years ago was reaching its final move. Cole did not feel afraid. He felt something he had never felt before in his entire life. He felt anger that had a direction. The dog leaned against his leg. The wind moved low through the sage. And in the dark mouth of the cave behind him, in a place he had not yet found, a steel chest sat waiting in the dust. And inside that chest, a letter waited. And the letter began with 2 words his grandfather had carried for 11 years. 2 words he had written by lamplight with a hand that shook. because he had not known if anyone would ever read them. My boy. Cole sat on the porch with the dog beside him until the last of the light was gone, and then he stood up and walked back into the cabin to begin. The cabin was cold. Cole found a kerosene lamp on the shelf above the table. He found a tin of matches in the drawer. He struck a match against the iron stove and held the flame to the wick, and the wick caught, and the light came up slow and yellow, and made the room a small bright thing in a very large dark. He set the lamp on the table. He sat in the chair. The chair had been his grandfather's chair. The seat was worn smooth in the shape of a body that was not Cole's body, but had been made of the same blood. He put his hands on the table where Wade had put his hands. He breathed the air that Wade had breathed. The dog lay down at his feet on the wooden floor and let out a long, slow sigh. The kind of sigh a dog gives when it has finally come home. Cole sat for a long time. He did not eat. He had no food. He had a granola bar in his cardboard box, but he did not get up to retrieve it. He sat with his hands flat on the table and he listened to the wind come down off the ridge and rattle the sheet metal somewhere behind the cabin. And he thought about the camera in the cave and the lock on the door and the smile on Marlene Hayes' face when she slid the offer across her desk. He thought about Wade. Wade had known. Wade had known that men would come. Wade had built this place into a vault and had locked it and had waited for a boy. Cole stood up. He took the kerosene lamp by its wire handle. He took the flashlight in his other hand. He walked out the back door of the cabin and across the dust of the yard, and the dog rose stiffly and followed him, and the two of them moved together through the cold night air toward the dark slash in the cliff. The cave opened up around him. Cole had not gone deep before. He had stopped at the camera. Now he walked past the place where the camera had been, and the cave widened into a chamber the size of a small church. The lamplight could not reach the ceiling. The walls were slick with the slow weep of water that had been moving through this stone for 10,000 years. His footsteps echoed and were not echoes, but small replies from rooms further on. He kept walking. The chamber narrowed into a passage. The passage forked. He took the right fork because the air moving against his face came from that direction, and the air smelled of cold, deep water. And his grandfather had taught him long ago that air in a cave was a creature with a memory, and you should always follow it the way you would follow a good dog. The passage bent. The passage opened into a small alcove tucked into the rock like a pocket sewn into a coat, and in that alcove set against the back wall, on a low ledge of dry stone, was a footlocker. Cole stopped breathing. It was an Army-issue footlocker. The olive paint had faded to the color of a bruise. The corners were reinforced with brass that had gone almost black with age. A heavy padlock hung on the front, the kind with a thick steel shackle and a key slot that meant business. On top of the footlocker, sitting square in the middle as if placed there with great care, was a small flat tin box. The kind of tin that holds biscuits or buttons or the small private things a man carries through a life. Cole walked to it. He set the lamp on the floor. He knelt. He lifted the lid of the tin. Inside, on a folded square of clean white cotton cloth, lay a single brass key, and under the key, an envelope. The envelope was thick. The envelope had been sealed with a small smear of red wax. On the front of the envelope, in a hand that shook a little but did not waver, was one word: Cole. He picked up the envelope, his name on the paper, written in pen and ink by a hand that had stopped writing 12 years ago. He held the envelope and he looked at it, and his eyes filled the way Earl Mathers had filled at the counter of the diner, and he did not try to stop them. Out here in this cold stone room, he could let them come. He broke the seal. He pulled out the pages. There were several. The hand was the hand he half remembered from birthday cards and from labels on jars of preserves in a kitchen long ago. He set the pages on the lid of the footlocker. He lifted the lamp closer. The dog lay down beside him and rested his gray muzzle on his front paws. Cole began to read. "My boy, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have come back. You did not have to come. They told you the land was worthless. They told you the cave was a hole in the ground. They told you I was nothing. But you came anyway. That stubborn streak of yours always was a Holloway thing. Your grandmother had it. Your father had it. I have it. And by the grace of God, you have it too. Or you would not be holding this paper. I have so much to say to you that I do not know where to begin. So I will begin with the lie. They told you I gave you up. They told you I signed papers and walked away. They told you I was an old man with no money and a fallen down house, and the law agreed with them and there was nothing to be done. That is what they told you. That is what they wrote in the file. That is what they made the truth. It is not the truth, Cole. I never gave you up. They took you. There is a difference between those two things, and I want you to hold that difference in your hand the way a man holds a piece of evidence." Cole read the words once. He read them again. He read them a third time because the first two times the meaning had not been able to find purchase in him. He read on. "When your parents passed, you were 6 years old. You came to live with me in that little house outside Bend. We had 3 months. 3 good months. I taught you to skip a stone on the river. I taught you the names of the birds. I taught you that a hammer is a guide, not a fist. You laughed easier than I had laughed in 50 years. You called me Pap. You slept on the cot in the front room with the door open so you could hear me breathing in the kitchen. And then the man came. His name was Royce Calloway. He was a state attorney with the Department of Family Services. He wore a gray suit. He drove a black car. He sat at my kitchen table and he told me that the state had reviewed my situation and had determined that I was unfit. I was too old. The pension was too small. The house was too far from a school. He said the words gently the way a butcher gentles a calf. I told him to leave my house. He came back the next week. He came back with 2 more men. He came back with a thick stack of papers and a pen. He said to me, "Mr. Holloway, you have a choice. You can sign these papers voluntarily, relinquishing your parental rights, and we can place your grandson in a long-term group facility where he will receive stable care until the age of 18. Or you can refuse, and we will take him through the courts and we will win because we always win. And we will then place him in foster rotation." Foster rotation. Mr. Holloway means he will move every 9 to 14 months for the next 12 years. different families, different schools, different states sometimes. Some of those families are good, some of them are not. We cannot guarantee. But what we can guarantee if you fight us is that you will never see him again. We will see to it personally. I sat at that table, Cole. I sat at that table for a long time. There was a fly on the window. I watched it. I had not slept in 3 nights. My hand was on a pen I did not want to pick up. And I thought about you sleeping in the front room. I thought about you bouncing through 12 years of strangers' houses. I thought about you in a different bed every 9 months. I thought about a boy who would learn that nothing was permanent and no one was real and home was a word grown-ups used to keep him still. I picked up the pen. I signed. That was the worst day of my life. Worse than Korea. Worse than your grandmother's funeral. Worse than the day they brought me word about your parents. The worst day. Because on every other bad day in my life, I was the one losing something. On that day, I was the one taking it from you. And I knew while I was doing it that you would grow up believing I had abandoned you. I knew you would carry that. I knew you would hate me for it. I let you hate me, Cole. I let you hate me so that you would have a roof and a bed and a school. I let you hate me so that the man in the gray suit would not put you on a road that has no bottom. Forgive me if you can. Do not forgive me if you cannot. Either way, you should know. Cole could not see the page anymore. He set the lamp aside. He set the letter aside. He put both his hands flat on the cold stone floor of the cave, and he bent his head, and a sound came up out of him that he did not know he had been carrying. It was the sound a boy makes when a thing he has believed about himself for 12 years collapses all at once. The dog moved closer. The dog put his head on Cole's knee. He cried in the cave for a long time. The lamp burned. The dog breathed slow. The water moved in the deep stone somewhere behind him. Somewhere deeper in the dark, a slow and patient sound like a heart that did not stop. After a while, his breathing eased. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. He picked up the pages again. There is more I have to tell you. I do not have time to tell it the way I would like sitting on the porch with you and a glass of cold water. So I will tell it the only way I have on this paper. And you will have to put the rest of it together with the men I am leaving behind to help you. This land is not worthless. My father told me, and his father told him, that there was water in this rock. Real water. Not the brackish, salty, useless water that comes up out of most wells in this part of the state. Sweet water. Cold water. Deep water. The kind of water that in a country as dry as Eastern Oregon is the only thing that matters in the long run. I spent the last 10 years of my life proving it. I taught myself geology out of textbooks I bought used. I drove to Bend twice a year and paid a real laboratory to run real tests on water I carried out in glass jars. I mapped this cave system on graph paper by lamplight, foot by foot, until I had every passage, every chamber, every drip, and every flow. I commissioned a private survey from an independent engineer in 2009. The results are in the chest. So is everything else. The men who want this land know. They have been drilling all around me for 15 years. They have come up dry every time. They have begun to suspect that the source is here under this rock. They cannot find it. They cannot prove it, but they suspect. Royce Calloway works for them now. Read that line again, Cole. Royce Calloway works for them now. The man who took you from me 12 years ago does not work for the state anymore. He works for a company called Titan Industries. He has been working for them for 9 years. The same man, the same gray suit, the same pen. I do not believe in coincidences. I do not think you do either. Cole read that paragraph 3 times. His hands were shaking. The chest contains everything. The maps, the survey, the lab results, the deed history. A retainer paid in full 11 years ago to a young attorney named Walter Crawford in Portland. Walter is the son of a man I served with. He has known you since you were 2 years old, though you will not remember him. He is waiting for your call. His card is in the chest. There is also money, $10,000 in cash. It is not a fortune. It is what a man with a small pension could put away over 11 years if he ate beans and did not buy new boots. It is enough to begin, enough to fix the roof, enough to feed yourself for a year, enough to hire help. And there is one more thing in the chest, Cole. The most important thing. Do not open the smaller box at the bottom of the locker until Walter tells you to. Do not look at it. Do not show it to anyone. Trust me on this. There will come a day in a courtroom when Walter will ask you for it. On that day, you will give it to him, and what is inside will end this. Not before. I have waited 11 years for you to come back. I have waited because I knew you would. I knew the boy who skipped stones on the river was still in there somewhere. And I knew when the day came that the state opened its hand and let you go, you would come looking for what was yours. You are mine, Cole. You always were. They could put their pen on a piece of paper, but they could not change that. Be careful. Be patient. Be hard when you have to be hard. And be a man your grandmother would have been proud of. All my love every day, even the days you did not know I was loving you. Pap. Cole sat on the cave floor with the letter in his lap and did not move for a long time. The lamp flickered once. The flame steadied. The dog stirred and looked up at him, and the old yellow eyes in that gray face seemed to know everything that had just been read. Cole picked up the brass key. He fitted it to the padlock. He turned it. The lock opened with a single deep and final click. The chest rose on its hinges with a long groan, and Cole leaned the lamp closer and looked down into the 11 years of his grandfather's secret labor. A leather-bound journal, thick the cover, soft from handling. A roll of survey maps, yellowed at the edges, tied with twine. A folder of laboratory reports, the seals still unbroken. A small velvet pouch, heavy in the hand. He lifted it. He loosened the drawstring. Bundles of cash. 20s. 50s. Held with rubber bands. $10,000, exactly just as the letter had said. A photograph of his parents on their wedding day. A photograph of himself as a baby. A photograph of a boy of 5 being held on the lap of an old man on a porch he now recognized as the porch of this cabin. A small silver locket. He opened it. Inside on the left, a tiny photograph of a woman with kind eyes. His grandmother. On the right, his own face at the age of 6. A simple white business card embossed in black. Walter T. Crawford, attorney at law. Crawford and Associates, Portland, Oregon. A phone number. And at the bottom of the chest, beneath everything else, a small wooden box about the size of a paperback novel. The grain was walnut. The lid was secured with a single brass clasp. Cole did not open it. His grandfather had asked him not to. He lifted it out, set it carefully on the stone, and rested his hand on it for a long moment before placing it gently back where it had been. He closed the chest. He closed it slowly, the way a man closes a casket he has been asked to bear. He took the journal and the maps and the lab reports. He took the cash. He took the photographs. He took the locket. He took Walter Crawford's card. He left the small wooden box where it lay. He carried it all back to the cabin. The lamp lit the table. He spread the contents across the wood. The maps unrolled into a beautiful, terrible thing. Wade had drawn the cave system in pencil with the patience of a monk illuminating a manuscript. Every passage, every chamber, every fissure, every measurement. The handwriting was small and exact, and it covered the margins like the notes of a man arguing with God. The lab reports were not the homemade scribbles of a crank. They were on the letterhead of an accredited environmental laboratory in Bend, signed by a chemist whose name Cole did not know. The water from the source was potable. The water from the source was at a flow rate that, if developed responsibly, could supply the irrigation needs of a small valley. The water from the source was in the dry economic language of a chemist's report of exceptional quality and significant commercial value. Cole looked at the maps. He looked at the reports. He looked at the cash. He looked at the dog asleep at his feet. He thought of Royce Calloway sitting at a kitchen table in Bend 12 years ago, with a fly on the window and a pen in his hand. He stood up. He walked outside. He stood in the cold black air with one bar of cell signal on the cheap burner phone he had bought in Portland, and he dialed a number on the letter from Titan Industries. It rang twice. A man's voice answered, polished, smooth. The voice of a man who had been waiting for this call. Calloway. This is Cole Holloway. A pause. Just a beat. The pause of a man arranging his face for a phone call. He did not need to arrange his face for, because nobody could see it. Cole. Mr. Holloway. We were beginning to worry. Have you had a chance to consider our generous offer? I considered it, and the land is not for sale. The pause this time was longer. Son, I want to be careful with you here. You are 18 years old. You have, by my understanding, $200 in a duffel bag. The land you are sitting on is by every conceivable metric worthless. We are offering you a fresh start. We are offering you an opportunity that most kids in your position would not see in their lifetimes. I would like for you to take a moment and reconsider before you say something you cannot take back. Cole watched the stars. The wind moved. I have his maps, Mr. Calloway. I have the lab reports from Bend. I know what is under this rock. The silence on the line was a whole new silence. It was the silence of a man whose face had just rearranged itself in a way that could not be hidden in his voice. You don't know what you're talking about. I think I do. Whatever your grandfather told you, son, was the rambling of a sick old man with delusions. There is no water on that property. We have drilled this region for 15 years. You drilled around it. You didn't drill on it. He wouldn't let you. Mr. Holloway, listen to me very carefully. The voice had changed now. The polish was gone. What was underneath was a thing that did not bother to be friendly. You are going to take $5,000 and go away. You are going to do this because the alternative is that I tie you up in a court process that will take 6 years and consume every penny you have ever earned or will ever earn. You will lose, and when you lose, you will have nothing. Not the land, not the money, not your dignity. Take the offer, son. Take it tonight. Cole let the silence sit. He let it sit until the silence belonged to him and not to Calloway. Then he said very quietly, I know who you are, Mr. Calloway. I know what you did at my grandfather's kitchen table in 2014. I know what you do for a living now, and I know exactly how this ends. He hung up. He stood in the dark with the phone in his hand and his blood loud in his ears, and the dog had come up beside him and was leaning against his leg. He did not feel afraid. He felt the way a young man feels when he has just thrown a punch he has been carrying for 12 years, and the punch has connected. He went back inside. He did not sleep. In the morning, Cole walked the 5 miles back to Juniper Creek with Scout walking beside him, and the dust of the road rose around them in slow gold clouds. He went to the general store. Hollis Bishop was unloading boxes off the back of a truck. He looked up as Cole walked in. Figured you'd be on the next bus out, son. I'm staying. Hollis stopped what he was doing. Are you now? I need supplies. I need a roofer. I need somebody who knows the place. Hollis looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded slowly the way a man nods when something he has been hoping for has begun. Otis Reed, he said. He's the man you want. He worked the place with your grandfather for 20 years. He's 65 and ornery, and he won't take easy money. But he's the best carpenter in 3 counties. You can find him at the trailer behind the gas station. Tell him I sent you. Tell him whose grandson you are. He'll come. He came. Otis Reed pulled into the property at noon in a Dodge pickup older than Cole with a toolbox in the bed and a thermos of coffee in his lap. He climbed out slow. He was a thick man with a white beard cut short and forearms that looked like they had been carved from the same wood as his hammer. He did not shake hands. He did not smile. He walked the cabin in silence. He pressed his thumb into the wood of the porch posts. He pressed his palm against the boards of the back wall. He climbed up onto the roof and squatted there for a long time looking at the rafters. He came back down. He stood in front of Cole on the gravel of the yard with his hands in his back pockets, and he said, "You're Wade's boy, his grandson. You favor him around the eyes. Thank you." It wasn't a compliment. He was an ugly old cuss. Cole almost laughed. Otis spat in the dust. This cabin needs a new roof. New floor in the back third. 2 of those windows are gone. You'll need glass and frames. The chimney's cracked. You don't fix it, you'll burn the whole thing down come December. The well casing is rotted. The pump's salvageable, but only if I get to it before the Baron sees. You looking at 3 weeks of work and about $4,000 in materials, give or take, depending on what I can find used. My day rate is $200, cash. You pay me at the end of each day or I don't come back the next morning. That clear?" "Yes, sir." Otis studied him. "Where you getting $4,000, son?" "My grandfather left it for me." Otis nodded once. Slow. He looked at the cabin. He looked at the cliff. He looked at the dog at Cole's feet. His eyes went a little softer. "Wade told me 10 years ago that the boy was going to come back one day. He said it the way a man says he's going to die. Just a fact. I thought he was talking out of his grief. I'm sorry I doubted him. It's all right." "No," Otis said. "It ain't." They started the next morning. Otis brought a small crew. 2 men, both as old as he was, both as quiet. They did not ask questions. They did not gossip. They worked. The hammers came down all day in slow, even rhythms, and the tar paper went up and the new shingles followed, and by the end of the first week, the cabin had a roof again. The first roof it had had in a long time. Cole worked with them. He hauled. He fetched. He learned. Otis showed him how to set a nail. Otis showed him how to read a level. Otis showed him how to plane a board so the grain ran true. Cole's hands blistered, and the blisters broke, and the broken blisters became calluses, and at night he would lie on the cot in the cleaned and swept cabin, and he would look at his own hands by lamplight, and he would not recognize them. They were beginning to be his grandfather's hands. On the 8th day, Cole drove with Otis into Bend. Otis dropped him at the offices of Crawford and Associates and went off to a lumber yard. The offices were small. Walter Crawford came out from behind a desk and stopped at the sight of him. Walter was a heavy-set man in his late 60s with a thick gray mustache and eyes the color of slate. He looked at Cole for a long moment without speaking. Then he came around the desk and put both his hands on Cole's shoulders. "Lord's son," he said, "you look just like him. You knew my grandfather. I held you when you were 2 years old. Your grandmother fixed me a sandwich. Your father drove me home because I'd had 3 beers and one too many. I knew him. I knew all of you." He led Cole into a small back office. He paid the retainer in 2015. The check cleared the day after he passed. "I have been waiting 11 years for you to walk through that door. And I will tell you, I had begun to wonder." He sat down. Cole sat across from him. Walter pulled a thick folder from a cabinet and laid it on the desk. "Your grandfather and my father served together. Korea. Busan the bad winter. They came home and my father went into law, and your grandfather went into carpentry. And they kept up over the years the way men of that generation kept up. Christmas cards. The occasional fishing trip. When your parents passed, my father was already in the ground himself. So your grandfather came to me." Cole listened. "He told me the whole thing, Cole. The man at the kitchen table. The papers. The signature. He told me he had made the worst trade a man could make, and he was going to spend the rest of his life proving it had been worth it. He hired me on a small retainer, a few $100s a year. He told me to wait. He told me one day his grandson would come, and on that day things would begin to move. They've begun to move." Walter looked at him. "Tell me," Cole told him. "The camera in the cave. The phone call. Calloway's threat. Walter listened without interrupting. When Cole was finished, Walter stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot and the gray sky for a long time. Then he turned around. "Cole, there is something I need to show you." He pulled a second folder from the cabinet. This one was thicker. The label on the side in Walter's careful hand said only Calloway. He laid it open. Royce Calloway worked for the Oregon Department of Family Services from 2008 to 2017. In those 9 years, he handled the cases of guardianship terminations involving elderly relatives of minor children and custody disputes. I have been pulling these records slowly and quietly for the last 7 years. Your grandfather's case was not the only one. Cole stared at the folder. There are 8 others, Cole. 8. All elderly. All sole surviving relatives of orphaned grandchildren. All in Eastern Oregon. All persuaded to sign voluntary termination papers under duress. And in every one of those 8 cases, the property of the elderly relative was sold or seized within 5 years of the signing. And in every single one of those cases, that property is now today owned by Titan Industries. Cole could not speak. It's a pattern. It's a systematic pattern. He left the state in 2017 and went to work for Titan. He's been completing the work he started. He's been buying up the land of the people he broke. Your grandfather's land is the last piece, Cole. Your grandfather is the only one who saw it coming and prepared for it. Your grandfather is the only one who left a son or a grandson the tools to fight back. Walter sat down heavily. This is much bigger than the water on your land. This is a corruption case that is going to crack a state government wide open. Cole looked at the folder. He put his hand on it. Then we crack it. That night, Cole drove back to Juniper Creek with Walter Crawford's voice in his head and Walter Crawford's folder under the seat. Otis dropped him off at the cabin. The dog came out to meet him. The stars were coming out over the ridge. He fed the dog. He fed himself. He sat at the table with the lamp burning and he opened his grandfather's journal. And he read by lamplight until his eyes burned. Around 2 in the morning, he heard the dog growl. It was a low growl, the kind of growl a dog gives at the back of his throat when something is wrong but not yet close. Cole stood up. He went to the window. There was an orange glow in the yard. He stared at it for a long second before his mind put the pieces together. The lumber. The pile of fresh-cut pine that Otis and his crew had stacked behind the cabin 2 days before. $800 worth of wood ready for the floors and the framing of the back room. It was on fire. Cole moved fast. He took the shotgun off the wall as he passed it, broke it, slipped 2 shells in from the box on the shelf, snapped it closed. He went out the back door at a run. The flames were already taller than a man. The wood was bone dry, and it was burning the way bone dry wood burns, fast and clean and impossibly hot. There was no hose. There was no water. He could only stand and watch it burn. In the orange light, he turned in a slow circle and looked at the dark country around the cabin. The dirt road ran away to the south. Somewhere out beyond the first ridge, a vehicle was moving fast. He could hear the engine going hard. He could see the dust rising in the moonlight. He could not catch them. He stood on the gravel with the shotgun in his hands, and the pile of his grandfather's saved money burning to nothing in front of him, and the rage came up his spine like a flood. And behind the rage was something colder and clearer. They were trying to scare him off the land. They were trying to bleed him out. It would have worked on a different boy. It was not going to work on him. By the time the sun came up over the ridge, Otis was there. Hollis Bishop was there. Earl Mathers was there in the passenger seat of Hollis's truck with his cane across his knees, looking at the smoking pile of charred lumber. With an expression Cole could not read until he realized it was grief the old kind. The kind that has been waiting 20 years for a chance to come out. Otis looked at the ashes. He looked at Cole. He looked at the shotgun leaning against the porch post. "Boy," Otis said, "you got friends." "Sir, you think this is the first time something like this has happened to a Holloway out here? You think your grandfather went down without a fight? They burned his barn in 2011. They poisoned his well in 2013. Half the men in this town remember it. Half the men in this town owe Wade Holloway a favor that they never got to repay because Wade Holloway never let a man stay in his debt." He turned. He looked at Earl in the truck. Earl gave him a small nod. "We're going to take shifts," Otis said. 3 men a night, armed, until this is over. Don't argue, son. We have already decided." Cole's throat closed. "I can't ask you to." "You ain't asking. We're telling. Wade stood on the line for us when it was our turn. It's our turn now." That night, Otis sat on the porch with a deer rifle across his knees and a thermos of coffee at his feet. Hollis Bishop sat at the back corner of the cabin with a shotgun. A man named Ray Tilden, whom Cole had not yet met, sat at the mouth of the cave with a flashlight and a sidearm. They did not speak much. They drank coffee. They watched. They listened. Cole walked among them once late just to see them. 3 old men, 3 old guns, a line of them around his cabin. Quiet, steady. The way men of that generation stood guard over the things that mattered. He went back inside. He sat at the table. He opened his grandfather's journal. He laid the letter beside it. He laid the shotgun across his lap. He thought about the man at the kitchen table in 2014. He thought about the boy he had been, 6 years old, sleeping on a cot in the front room with the door open. He thought about 8 other old men at 8 other kitchen tables in the gray suit and the pen and the lie. He thought about Walter Crawford in his small office with a folder 7 years in the making. He thought about a small wooden box, walnut grain brass clasp sitting in the dark of the cave behind the cabin waiting. The wind came down off the ridge. The dog breathed slow at his feet. Outside, 3 old men kept watch. And Cole Holloway, 18 years old. His hands, the color of his grandfather's hands, understood something he had not understood 24 hours ago. This was no longer a story about a worthless cave. This was a story about a promise an old soldier had made 12 years ago at a kitchen table. When he had picked up a pen he did not want to pick up and signed his grandson into the dark, and decided in that moment that he would spend the rest of his days building a way for the boy to come home and finish what he could not finish himself. The promise was Cole's now. He would keep it. He sat at the table with the lamp burning low, and the night outside was full of friends with rifles, and somewhere in the dark behind him, the cave breathed its slow, cold breath, and in the cave, a wooden box waited. And inside the wooden box, a thing waited that would when the day came and this. Cole reached out and put his hand on the journal. He whispered it to the empty room. "I'm here, Pap." The lamp flickered. The dog's tail thumped once against the floorboards. The flame steadied. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Juniper Creek was the color of pewter. Cole Holloway stood on the porch of the cabin and buttoned the cuffs of a clean white shirt that Otis Reed's wife had pressed for him the night before. The shirt was a size too large in the shoulders. The collar sat stiff against his neck. He had not worn a button-down shirt since he was 12 years old, and his fingers fumbled at the small white plastic discs, as if they were something foreign. He had been asked to handle without instruction. Scout watched him from the top step. The dog had not left his side in the 3 weeks since the fire. The dog slept at the foot of his cot. The dog walked with him to the cave each morning and waited at the entrance and walked back with him at dusk. The dog's gray muzzle had gone a little grayer in the cold mornings, and his hips dragged some, and Cole had begun to understand that this old animal was not going to live forever, and that every day he was given was a gift his grandfather had arranged from beyond a grave. Cole knelt and put his hand on the dog's head. "I'll be back tonight, old man." Scout's tail moved once against the boards. Otis pulled into the yard in the Dodge pickup at 5 minutes past 7. He was wearing a dark suit Cole had not known he owned. The jacket strained at the shoulders. The tie was a clip-on. Otis had shaved. His white beard was trimmed close to the jaw. He looked, Cole thought, like a man who had spent the last 3 weeks preparing to step into a world he had not visited in 20 years, and had decided to enter it on his own terms. "Get in, son. Walter's meeting us at the courthouse at 8:30. Cole climbed in. The truck rattled down the dirt road toward Juniper Creek. The sage country opened up around them. The light was thin and gray. Cole watched the fence posts go by, and he thought of nothing and everything at once, the way a man thinks before a fight he has been preparing for all his life. They picked up Hollis Bishop at the general store. Hollis was in a gray suit that fit him better than Otis's fit Otis, and his hair was combed back, and he carried a small leather-bound notebook under one arm. Earl Mathers came out of the diner across the street with his cane and a cup of coffee, and he climbed into the bed of the pickup the way a younger man would have climbed in, and he sat on the wheel well with his cane across his knees and his coffee balanced on the toolbox, and he watched the road behind them as Otis pulled away. There were 9 other trucks behind them. Cole had not known until that morning how many. Word had spread through Juniper Creek slowly at first in the weeks after the fire, and then faster. The men on the porch the night the lumber burned had told their wives, and the wives had told their sisters, and the sisters had told the deacons of the small Methodist church on the south end of town, and the deacons had told everyone else. By the second week, families Cole had never met had begun pulling into the property in pickup trucks, leaving covered casseroles on the porch, and bundles of cut firewood by the back door, and once a hand-crocheted blanket that Cole had laid across the foot of his cot and slept under every night since. A woman named Edna Whitaker, who had taught 3rd grade in Juniper Creek for 31 years, had come up the gravel one afternoon with her husband and had stood on the porch and looked at Cole for a long time, and had said, "Only your grandfather fixed our roof in 1992 when my husband was sick. He would not take $1. She had set a tin of homemade biscuits on the porch and walked back to her truck without saying anything else. That was Juniper Creek. That was the country Wade Holloway had built his last years inside, And Cole understood now that his grandfather had not been alone out here. He had been the kind of alone a man chooses when he has work to do. The convoy of pickups came down out of the sage country and onto the highway and into the small county seat, where the courthouse sat on a square of patchy lawn beneath 2 old elms. The building was 3 stories of yellow brick with a green copper dome that had gone the color of a faded flag. The trucks pulled into the gravel lot one by one and parked, and men climbed out and women climbed out, and a few children. And the sound of pickup doors slamming filled the morning air like the slow, deliberate beat of a drum. Cole stood on the courthouse steps and looked back at them. 40 people, maybe. 50. Old men in old suits. Women in church dresses. A man in his 30s in clean Carhartt overalls who had taken the day off at the lumberyard. The deacon of the Methodist church. The owner of the gas station. The widow of a man Wade had once helped build a chicken coop. They came up the steps slowly in 2s and 3s, and they did not speak. And they filed into the courthouse behind him, as if they were walking into a sanctuary. Walter Crawford was waiting in the lobby. The lawyer was wearing a gray suit and carrying a battered leather briefcase that had once belonged to his father. His mustache was trimmed. His eyes had the steady, quiet light of a man who had been waiting a very long time for a particular morning, and the morning had finally come. He put his hand on Cole's shoulder. "You ready, son?" "I'm ready." "Remember what we talked about. You do not speak unless I ask you to speak. You do not react. Whatever they say about your grandfather, whatever they say about you, you sit still. And you keep your face quiet. We let the truth do the work." "Yes, sir." "And Cole." "Yes, sir. He is here. He is in this room with us. You understand me?" "Yes, sir." They walked through the double oak doors into the courtroom. Royce Calloway was already at the plaintiff's table. He sat with 6 attorneys. The attorneys wore suits that had not come off any rack in eastern Oregon. Their leather briefcases sat in a neat row on the floor at their feet. Their laptops were already open. Their water glasses were already filled. Calloway himself was a tall, thin man in his late 50s, with a sharp jaw and a careful haircut that had been kept careful through dye. And when he turned in his chair to look at Cole, walking up the aisle with Walter Crawford, he wore the small, professional smile of a man who had been watching the door. Cole did not look at him. Cole walked to the defense table and sat down beside Walter, and the courtroom filled behind him with the slow settling sound of 40 people from Juniper Creek finding their seats. The judge entered. His name was Judge Halloran. He was a heavy man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead, and a face that had presided over 1,000 small cases in this small county, and had developed over those 1,000 cases an unhurried patience. He sat. He cleared his throat. He looked over the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, we are here this morning on the matter of Titan Industries Holdings Corporation versus Holloway. A civil action concerning the validity of a deed and the standing of a quiet title petition. I have read the briefs. Mr. Lansing, you may proceed." The lead attorney for Titan was a man named Lansing. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. He approached the podium with the unhurried confidence of a man who had won many of these mornings in many of these rooms. "Your Honor, the matter before this court is straightforward. My client, Titan Industries, has held a standing offer on the property in question for over a decade. The deed presented by the defense is a document of questionable provenance. The defendant is an 18-year-old former ward of the state with no demonstrable legal capacity to administer the estate of a man he had no contact with for 11 years. We contend that the deed should be invalidated, that the property should revert to the state, and that the standing offer of my client should be honored as the only legitimate path to clear title. He spoke for 40 minutes. He spoke about Wade Holloway as if Wade Holloway had been a confused old man. He spoke about the deed as if the deed had been forged. He spoke about the maps in the chest as if they had been the doodles of a man with too much time on his hands and not enough sense. He spoke about Cole as if Cole were a pawn being moved by some unspecified third party. And he spoke about the property as if it were nothing more than a pile of rocks that an unscrupulous attorney was attempting to inflate into something it had never been. Calloway watched. Calloway smiled. The smile was small. The smile was steady. When Lansing was finished, he sat down. He poured himself a glass of water. He took a small sip. He looked across the aisle at Walter Crawford, and the smile did not leave his face. Judge Halloran turned. "Mr. Crawford." Walter stood. He did not button his jacket. He did not approach the podium with a confident stride. He moved the way an older man moves slowly, deliberately, the way a carpenter moves when he is about to begin a piece of work that will take all day. He set a thin folder on the podium. He opened the folder. He looked at Lansing for a long moment. And then he looked at Calloway, and Calloway's smile did not change, and Walter began. "Your Honor, my client is the lawful heir of Wade Holloway. The deed in question was filed in this county in 1968 and has been continuously valid for 58 years. The chain of title is clean. The transfer to my client is documented. The opposing counsel has presented no evidence of forgery, no evidence of incapacity, no evidence of fraud. The opposing counsel has presented an argument." He paused. "I would like to present evidence." The first thing he presented was the deed itself, then the chain of title, then the geological surveys, then the laboratory reports from Bend with their original unbroken seals, then the maps unrolled on a long table set up before the bench, each one labeled and authenticated and dated. Then the photographs of the cave system taken by a professional surveyor in 2014. Then the engineer's report signed and notarized. The water on the property was real. The water was abundant. The water was the only viable commercial source within a 40-mile radius. Lansing objected to each piece of evidence in turn. The judge overruled each objection in turn, with the slow patience of a man who had read the briefs and had already made up his mind about the merits of these particular objections. When Walter was finished with the property evidence, he turned and looked at the gallery. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to call several witnesses to character and to history. They are not formally on the witness list. They are residents of Juniper Creek who knew Wade Holloway personally. I believe their testimony will establish a context for the court that the opposing counsel has been at pains to obscure." Lansing was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We had no notice of these witnesses." Judge Halloran looked at Lansing over his reading glasses. "Mr. Lansing, you have spent the last 40 minutes characterizing a man this court did not know. I'm going to allow Mr. Crawford a measure of latitude in introducing the court to that man. Sit down." Lansing sat. Earl Mathers came forward first. He did not use his cane. He walked up the aisle slowly, deliberately, his back straight in his old suit, and he climbed into the witness box, and he was sworn in, and Walter asked him a single question. "Mr. Mathers, can you tell the court what kind of man Wade Holloway was?" Earl looked at the judge. He looked at the gallery. He looked at Cole. His voice, when it came, was rough, but it was not unsteady. "Wade Holloway was the man who shoveled my driveway every morning the winter my wife was dying, and he never once knocked on my door to be thanked. Wade Holloway was the man who paid for a coffin for the Tilden boy when the family couldn't afford one, and asked nobody to know about it. Wade Holloway was the man who stood on the line in 1952, in a place none of us were ever supposed to come back from, and who came back home and built a life out here, and asked the world for nothing." He stopped. He swallowed. "That man did not abandon his grandson. I do not care what is written on a piece of paper somewhere in Salem. That man would have walked through fire to keep that boy. If he signed something, it was because somebody put a knife to his throat. I have known Wade Holloway since 1978. I am here to tell this court that I would stake my soul on that." The courtroom was very quiet. Earl stepped down. Hollis Bishop went next. He spoke about the years after 2014, about Wade growing thinner, quieter, more determined, about the maps and the trips to Bend, about the way the old man would come into the store once a week and buy the same things and never say anything except "Morning, Hollis," and "Good day to you." About the night in 2011 when Wade's barn had burned, and the night in 2013 when his well had been poisoned, and the way he had refused to file a police report either time because he had said the law in this state is not yet ready to know what it knows. Then Otis Reed. Otis sat in the witness box with his big hands folded in his lap, and he told the court in a voice that did not waver what Wade Holloway had told him in the spring of 2015, 6 weeks before he died. He said, "Otis the boy is gonna come back one day. He is gonna come back, and there is gonna be a fight, and I am not gonna be here for it. I need you to be here for it. I need you to make sure that boy has a roof over his head and food in his belly, and men around him who remember what kind of man his grandfather was." Otis paused. I gave him my word. He looked at Cole. "I am keeping it." The morning rolled on. One after another, witnesses came forward. The deacon, the widow of the chicken coop, the owner of the gas station, Edna Whitaker, the school teacher. They did not speak about water rights. They did not speak about deeds. They spoke about a man who had lived among them for 40 years and had been done a wrong. And they spoke about what kind of community lets a wrong sit and what kind of community does not. By 11 o'clock, the courtroom understood who Wade Holloway had been. Calloway's smile had thinned. His attorneys were murmuring at the table. Lansing was scribbling notes. Walter Crawford glanced once at Cole and gave him the smallest nod. It was time. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, the defense would now like to introduce a final piece of evidence. It is an audio recording made in October of 2014 in the kitchen of Wade Holloway's home outside Bend, Oregon. The recording was made by Mr. Holloway himself. It has been preserved continuously since that date. Its provenance has been verified by an independent forensic audio specialist whose report is in the court's file. With the court's permission, we will play it now." Lansing was on his feet so fast, his chair scraped the floor. "Your Honor, we have had no advance notice of this recording. We have had no opportunity to challenge its authenticity. We object in the strongest possible terms. Mr. Lansing, the forensic report has been on file with this court for 2 weeks. I assume your firm reviews the case file." Lansing's face changed. "Your Honor, we were not. We were not made aware." "You were made aware. You did not look. Sit down, Mr. Lansing." Lansing sat. Slowly. His face was the color of paper. Walter walked to the table where his briefcase sat. He opened it. He took out the small wooden box, the walnut grain, the brass clasp. The box that Wade Holloway had told Cole in a letter written by lamplight in a cave 11 years before, not to open until the day in court came. This was the day. Walter set the box on the podium. He opened the clasp. Inside, on a bed of red felt, sat a small reel of magnetic tape, cassette-sized, carefully wound with a paper label on the case, in Wade Holloway's hand, that read simply, October 14th, 2014. R. Calloway. Kitchen. Bend. Walter's hands were not steady. He did not try to hide it. He took the cassette out. He walked to the small audio cart that the bailiff had wheeled to the front of the courtroom, and he loaded the tape, and he turned and he looked across the aisle at Royce Calloway. For the first time all morning, the smile was gone from Calloway's face. What was there instead was the face of a man who had seen finally the thing he had been telling himself for 12 years would never come. Walter pressed play. There was a hiss. The hiss was the slow rise of an old recording, and the courtroom went very still. And somewhere a fly tapped against a window, and then the voices began. It was Wade's kitchen. Cole could hear it. He could hear in the silence between the words the old refrigerator humming in the corner. He could hear a chair creak. He could hear the small, clean, terrible sound of a pen being uncapped. And then clearly the voice of a younger Royce Calloway. The words came out of the speakers and crossed the courtroom like a slow, cold tide. And Cole watched the gallery hear them. And he watched Walter Crawford's face. And he watched the judge. And he watched, finally, the face of Royce Calloway, as the man heard his own voice from 12 years before, laying out the threat in calm, careful, deliberate language. The voice on the recording explained to Wade Holloway that there was a choice. The voice explained that the choice was between a stable placement and a foster rotation. The voice explained that the rotation could be insured, that the choice of placement could be insured, that the boy could be found, or the boy could be lost, depending on the willingness of the old man to sign the papers in front of him. The voice explained that a court fight would be a war the old man could not win. The voice explained that the old man would never see the boy again if the old man fought. The voice was not the voice of a state attorney explaining policy. The voice was the voice of a man committing a crime. The recording played for 19 minutes. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom was so complete that Cole could hear the fly at the window and the slow tick of the clock on the back wall and the breath of the dog who had not been brought in, but whose memory he carried in him like a second heart. Walter turned off the recorder. He stood in front of the podium. "Your Honor, the man who made that threat in October of 2014 sits at the plaintiff's table. He is the same man who 3 years later left state employment to take a position with Titan Industries, the corporation that has spent the subsequent 9 years acquiring the very properties he had a hand in clearing. The defense submits that the offer to purchase Mr. Holloway's land is not a business proposition. It is the final act of a fraud that began at a kitchen table in 2014 and that has continued uninterrupted for 12 years. He turned. He looked at Cole. He looked at the judge. My client is 18 years old. He is the grandson of the only man in this state who saw what was happening and had the foresight, the patience, and the courage to gather the evidence the rest of us did not know we needed. We are asking this court to deny the petition of Titan Industries. We are asking this court to confirm the validity of the deed. And we are asking that the contents of the file we have submitted, including the names of the 8 other elderly Oregonians who were placed in the same position as Wade Holloway, be referred to the Office of the Attorney General for Criminal Investigation. Walter sat down. The silence held. Calloway did not move. His attorneys did not move. Lansing was not writing. Judge Halloran took off his reading glasses. He set them carefully on the bench in front of him. He looked at the recording cart. He looked at Calloway. He looked at Cole. He picked up a single sheet of paper and held it between his fingers. This court will take a brief recess. Counsel for the plaintiff will remain. Counsel for the defendant, your client may step out with you. We will reconvene in 30 minutes. He stood. He walked back through the door behind the bench. Cole did not remember walking out of the courtroom. He remembered only Walter's hand on his elbow and the rush of cold morning air as the doors of the courthouse closed behind them, and Earl's face and Otis's face and Hollis Bishop's face and the faces of 40 people from Juniper Creek looking at him on the steps as if he were the one who had won something for them, when in truth it had been the other way around for a very long time. Earl came up. He did not speak. He put his old leathered hand on Cole's cheek, the way a man does to a son. His eyes were full. He would be proud, Earl said. Lord, son, he would be proud. Cole could not answer. He nodded. Earl let go of his face. They reconvened 30 minutes later. Calloway's table was thinner. 3 of the 6 attorneys had left. Calloway himself sat with his hands folded in front of him, and he was looking at the wood grain of the table, and he was a different man than the man who had walked into the courtroom that morning. Judge Halloran returned. He sat. He did not put his glasses back on. On the petition of Titan Industries Holdings Corporation, this court finds for the defendant. The deed of Wade Holloway transferred to Cole Holloway by lawful inheritance is confirmed. The petition is denied with prejudice. Title is quieted in favor of the defendant. He paused. Further, the court hereby refers the contents of Exhibit D, including all attached files relating to the conduct of Mr. Royce Calloway during his tenure with the Oregon Department of Family Services, to the Office of the Attorney General. A copy will be transmitted before the close of business today. Mr. Calloway, you will not leave the state pending the outcome of that review. Bond will be set at a hearing tomorrow morning. He banged the gavel once. We are adjourned. The courtroom rose. The sound that came up out of the gallery was not a cheer. It was a low, long, collective exhale, the sound 40 people make when they have been holding their breath for a longer time than they had realized. Earl Mathers wept openly for the first time since his wife had passed 8 years before. Otis Reed put his hand over his eyes. Hollis Bishop just stood there looking at Cole, his lips pressed thin. Cole turned to Walter. Walter was not smiling. Walter looked tired the way a man looks tired when he has finally laid a heavy thing down. "It is done, son." "Yes, sir." "Your grandfather is at peace." Cole could not speak. He looked across the aisle. Royce Calloway was being escorted out by a man in a deputy's uniform. The man was not handcuffing him. Not yet. The handcuffs would come tomorrow. Calloway walked with his head up, but his face had been emptied of something that had taken 12 years to fill. And Cole watched him go. Calloway did not look at him. That was all right. Cole had no more use for that man's eyes. He drove back to Juniper Creek that afternoon in the bed of Otis's pickup with Earl beside him on the wheel well. And the sage country opened up around them. And the late afternoon light came down off the ridges and he did not say a word. The whole way home. Earl did not either. Some silences are not fulfilling. The dog was waiting on the porch. Cole got out of the truck. Scout came down the steps slow on his arthritic hips, and Cole knelt in the gravel, and the dog put his gray muzzle in his hands, and Cole held him for a long time and did not let go. The dust settled in the yard. The trucks pulled away. The day ended. A year passed. It passed the way good years pass, which is to say, without remarking on themselves much. The cabin was finished. The roof was sound. The floors were new. The windows let in light. A small generator hummed in a shed Otis had built behind the cabin, and a clean copper line carried water up out of the cave to a kitchen sink that Cole had installed himself with Otis standing over his shoulder and correcting his work and grunting approval when the work was right. The contract with the water company had been signed in the spring. It was not a contract with Titan Industries. Titan Industries had been broken up by the Attorney General's investigation by then. The contract was with a smaller company, a regional outfit out of Boise, that had agreed to Cole's terms. Limited extraction, strict conservation, a flat lease paid annually that left the source intact and provided Cole with a comfortable, sustainable income for the rest of his life. Not a fortune. Enough. He had used the first year's payment to set up the Wade Holloway Foundation. The foundation paid the first month's rent and security deposit for any young person aging out of the Oregon foster system who could demonstrate a stable plan for the next 90 days. The foundation also covered the cost of replacing roofs for elderly residents of 3 counties in eastern Oregon, with the work done by Otis Reed and his crew, who took a fair wage and donated their time on the more difficult jobs. Cole had not asked his name to be on anything. The foundation was named for his grandfather. That was the way it should be. He was 19 now. He had filled out some. The shoulders were broader. The hands were rougher. He had grown a short beard that he kept trimmed close to the jaw, the way Otis kept his, and his hair had gone a little longer than it had been at the trial. And when he caught his reflection in a window, sometimes he stopped, because the face that looked back at him was a face that had begun to favor a man he had loved before he knew the meaning of the word. Walter Crawford came out to the property on a Saturday in late September, and they sat on the porch together with 2 cups of coffee, and they watched the light come down off the ridge. Calloway took the plea, Walter said. How long? 12 years. Federal time. The state ran some of it concurrent. 12 years. Same number, Walter said. Strange the way time arranges itself. Cole nodded. He did not feel triumphant. He did not feel anything in particular. He felt the way a man feels when a long debt has been paid, and the ledger has been closed, and the room is finally quiet. He was quiet for a moment. The coffee in his mug had gone lukewarm. He watched the way the afternoon light caught the rim of it. And the woman, he said. The caseworker. Walter looked out at the ridge. Marlene Hayes. She lost her license in March. She is cooperating with the Attorney General. She kept records, Cole. 11 years of small payments from a shell company that traced back to Titan. She knew. Not all of it, but enough. She has signed an affidavit. She is the reason we got the names of the other 3 caseworkers in the rotation. So she helped. In the end. Yes. Cole watched a hawk turn slow over the sage. I hope she sleeps better now. Walter nodded. I think she does, son. I think she does. Walter stayed for supper. Otis came over, and Earl, who had begun to walk with 2 canes now, but was still as sharp as a tin roof in a hailstorm, and Hollis Bishop. They ate at the long pine table Cole had built with his own hands. They drank coffee. They told stories about Wade Holloway, and Cole listened. And the stories filled in pieces of his grandfather he had not known existed. Earl Mathers passed in November. He went in his sleep in the small white house behind the diner, with a photograph of his late wife on the bedside table and a half-finished crossword in his lap. Cole found him the next morning. He had stopped by the way he stopped by every Tuesday morning to drink coffee with the old man and to listen. Earl had left the diner to him in the will. Cole had not expected that. He kept it the way Earl had kept it. The same menu, the same hand-painted sign, the same coffee brewed strong served in the same heavy white ceramic mugs. He hired a young woman from Juniper Creek to run it day to day. A girl in her 20s named Leah Tilden, the granddaughter of the boy whose coffin Wade Holloway had paid for 40 years before. The Tildens did not forget. 3 generations now, and they did not forget. Leah ran a clean kitchen. The diner stayed open 6 days a week. On Sundays, it was closed the way Earl had always closed it. Cole worked the counter on Saturday mornings. He liked the rhythm of it. He liked refilling cups for old men who had known his grandfather and who still sometimes called him Wade's boy and not Cole. And he did not mind because he understood that to be Wade's boy in this country was a thing a man should be proud to be. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, the second autumn of his ownership, Cole walked out to the cave alone. Scout came with him. The dog was very old now. He moved slow. He stopped to rest on the path, and Cole waited each time, and they came together eventually to the mouth of the cave. Cole did not go inside. He sat on the flat stone outside the entrance, the stone where his grandfather had sat, where the worn place in the rock fit a body shaped like his own. He took the silver locket out of his shirt pocket. He opened it. His grandmother's kind eyes. His own face at 6 years old. The wind moved through the sage. The cave breathed its slow, cold breath behind him. Scout lay down at his feet and put his gray muzzle on his paws. Cole looked up at the ridge. The light was the color of an old bronze coin. A red-tailed hawk turned in a long, slow circle against the pale sky. Somewhere down the dirt road, a pickup truck was coming up from town, the way pickup trucks had come up that road in his grandfather's time, the way they would come up that road in his time and in the times after his. He spoke without meaning to. "I'm home, Pap." The wind answered. It did not say anything. It just moved. The dog's tail thumped once against the dust. Cole closed the locket. He put it back in his shirt pocket. He stood. He walked back to the cabin with the old dog at his side, and the porch creaked under his boots, the way porches do in country built by men who knew how to build them. And he opened the door and stepped inside and lit the lamp, and the light came up slow and yellow and warm. He hung his coat on the peg. He set the kettle on the stove. He took down a single white ceramic mug. He sat at the table where his grandfather had sat, and he laid his hands flat on the wood, and he listened to the wind come down off the ridge. And he was not alone, and he had never been alone. And a man who keeps his word does not ever truly leave the people he has loved. Even when the world makes him put down a pen on a piece of paper and walk away from a boy sleeping in a front room with the door open. Wade Holloway had kept his word. Cole Holloway would keep his. The kettle began to whistle. The dog's eyes closed. The lamp burned steady on the table and outside the cabin in the dark behind the cliff. The cave breathed its old cold breath, and the water moved in the deep stone, the way it had moved for 10,000 years and would move for 10,000 more. A boy had inherited a worthless cave. What he had found inside had given him back his life and his name and his home, and the truth of a man who had never abandoned him, not for one single day. That was the inheritance. That was the whole of it. That was enough.